This isn't a trial run, you know, this is it. He said, don't ever get to a point in your life when you think, gosh, I wish I had. I walked to the North Pole. I'm one of the first 135th person in history in mankind to go on an expedition. I've lived and worked in 15 countries around the world, Madagascar, in Ukraine, in Trinidad, in China. I took on the Premier League, English Premier League, in a legal case. Everyone said we were mad. My son said I was mad. It was the most watched case in British legal history at the time. 33,000 people watched it. Last 25 years I've been the CFO of 5 different companies on the London Stock Exchange, so I've kind of done the tour.
But look, thank you for sitting down with me today. For people listening and watching that are not familiar with you, would you be able to give a brief introduction to Gordon?
Sure, I'm Scottish, although I've lived in the north of England for a long time, and actually I qualified as an accountant in the 80s, which is an awful long time ago. But since then my career has meandered more into the energy space, oil and gas, minerals, and since then I was doing some math this morning. I've lived and worked in 15 countries around the world. Wow. I've been on the board of 7 different public companies in both non-exec roles and executive roles. And last 25 years I've been the CFO of 5 different companies on the London Stock Exchange. So I've kind of done the tour. I've lived in some weird and wonderful places. I might touch on them later.
What is over the last 25 years on the London Stock Exchange, what do you think has changed the most about running a public company?
I think the digital age is really, the last few years, the digital age has suddenly meant that the communication process between the leaders of public companies and their audience, whether it's stakeholders or shareholders or whatever, has changed because suddenly people can talk about you in a way they couldn't talk about you before. You've got the Telegram groups, the social media groups. Are they good? In a lot of sense they are, because people are talking about you, but then there's the people with agendas, people with misunderstandings about how things work, the timings, and it can actually be quite destructive. And then the problem you have as a director is you can't go on there and challenge. Yeah. Because you've got to use your natural regulatory audience. So pretty frustrating at times. I've desperately wanted to go on there, particularly 2 or 3 individuals who I won't name, and they're pretty well known for doing these sort of things, who just put misleading information out. Yeah. And then your PR company struggles to challenge, and it's a real strain. That's probably the biggest change I've seen, certainly in the last 4, 5, 6 years.
Oh, that's an interesting point. So over the last 25 years plus, one thing that you receive in abundance as a leader of a public company is advice. Yeah. Sometimes it's from disgruntled shareholders, sometimes it's from people you pay, sometimes it's from board members, a whole range of places. Not all of it is good. But let's start on the positive side, because there's not enough positivity in British public markets at the moment. What is the best piece of advice that you have received as a public leader?
Yeah, that's an easy one actually. Jimmy was a Scottish guy. I was living and working in Tunisia on a major project, offshore facilities, onshore facilities. I hadn't lived and worked abroad before. I'd been UK based. Suddenly you're in a strange environment, and I got to know Jimmy pretty well. He's pocket rockets, 5'1" Scottish guy, health and safety expert, ex-military, just unbelievable character. And we're having a beer one night, and he said something which fundamentally changed my life, which he said, this isn't a trial run, you know, this is it. He said, don't ever get to a point in your life when you think, gosh, I wish I had. And it literally changed things, because every now and again when you're faced with a major decision, do you, don't you, little Jimmy would go on, you know you can. Yeah. Because it's always easy to take the easy option out, you know, and what have I done that others have not done? And things that I could hear Jimmy shouting at me to go and do. I've walked to the North Pole. I'm one of the first 135th person in history in mankind to go on an expedition, which is the better part of a month, traipsing in minus 30 degrees, pulling a sledge, sleeping overnight in a tent. Wow. Did that, raised £750,000 for charity. I've lived and worked in Madagascar, in Ukraine, in Trinidad, in China, Algeria. Some places where you would say, well, there's a bit of risk and so on, but you know, I thought the opportunity was too good to turn, and the cultural experience. And probably the other thing was partly business, partly not, was with a business colleague. I took on the Premier League, English Premier League, in a legal case in 2020. which ran the course for a whole year. 2 fans took on the English Premier League. And why could we do that? Because we had the skills, we had the support, and we knew we had a case we could win. And as a result of that, when the case ran, and everyone said we were mad, my son said I was mad, I could hear Jimmy saying, you can do this, you know. So we took it on, and it was when it was run, the case, it was the most watched case in British legal history at the time. 33,000 people watched it virtually. And the result of that, Newcastle United takeover happened. And the whole case was about, we know what we can do, we've got the skills to do it, and we know who we can bring in. So all of that was down to that advice of, you know, you're only here once. If you get an opportunity to do something you would naturally do, or it's quite easy to say that's too difficult or too risky. Sometimes it's, you know, go and do it, because otherwise I wouldn't have gone to the North Pole.
So is for public leadership, is sort of the message there, approach it with a bias to action? For example, in the boardroom, where there are some people that are more risk tolerant, some that are more risk averse, and you know, you've mainly worked in growth companies, early stage companies. Having that bias to action and actually just doing things is more likely to get you where you want, even if it's wrong, than spending too long sitting in the decision. Is that sort of take? Yeah,
that's true. I mean, boards have to take balanced decisions, but at times they have to also take an element of risk, because, you know, otherwise, you know, the kind of companies I've been involved in, you know, we're looking to make 5, 6, 10 times return. Yeah. We're not looking for nice dividend streams. Well, that's a different type of business. So to get there, you have to do certain things. You don't have to go silly risk, but you have to do a balanced risk. So sometimes, you know, when you're faced with a decision, it's easy to just say no. But then it's back to Jimmy saying, well, you know, come on, why not? You know, so sometimes successful, sometimes not. But, you know, it's really down to the balance. But, you know, take risk.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. Measured risk.
Well, it is measured risk, yeah, and actually, yeah, okay.
And then what about flipping it? What about the worst piece of advice that you've received as a public leader?
It was something that also, it came back to risk again, actually. I got involved in an incident on a train, on a tube, a few years back. And when I stepped in to help someone who was being abused on a train, it was a lady, and nobody else lifted a finger. So it was me challenging this individual who was being a bit abusive in quite a stressful situation. And we were out face to face and so on. And I didn't back down, because I had been bullied at school. So I had learned from that not to take bullies. So you come away from that, and the guy got off the train or whatever, the tube. And then everyone said to me afterwards, you're absolutely mad. He could have had a knife, whatever. But, you know, so that was good advice, but it wasn't good advice. Sometimes you have to take balanced risk again. And in my mind, what he was doing was wrong. So then it was down to right and wrong. So yes, I could have sat there and looked at the floor like everybody else was doing, or get up and do something and actually make a difference. So I would do the same again. Again, you take a view on risk. Maybe if it was six guys, I probably wouldn't do it. But sometimes you've got to do these things. So it was good advice, but bad advice as well.
So zooming out we started this conversation by talking about how public leadership has changed over the last 25 years. Looking further ahead now, and the world continues to change. And I think one thing that has become more of a certainty now versus 25 years ago is that change will continue to happen, and it will probably happen much faster, because the world those cycles are becoming more and more condensed. If you project ahead to the next 5 years for people that run public companies, what is a skill that you think will become more important, or that in 5 years' time public leaders will need to be focusing on more than they are now?
It's something I'm not particularly good at, but AI is coming.
Yeah.
And you read things that you're sent, and you can sense they're written through AI, because you can. They're so clean and tidy, or whatever. Or there's no soul to them, and you can tell when there's no soul to an email or whatever. But it's coming in a big way, and I'm a bit of a dinosaur, but I know it's coming, and so on. So I'm struggling into the process. And anybody who's a director or a manager or a leader in a company is going to have to embrace it in some form or another, either through specialist skills and support services, or just learning more about what the opportunities are. Because sticking your head in the sand and trying to pretend it doesn't exist is it's probably not a good way of actually moving your company forward.
And I suppose like my personal view with this is, and I'm probably of the generation where you're expected to know a lot more about AI.
Yeah.
And I sort of do, but I also sort of don't. But I also think that's because no one really knows yet exactly how, when it reaches its steady state, this is going to fit into the world of business.
Yeah.
Like ChatGPT and using it to sort of figure stuff out is sort of how most people are using it now, but much like when the internet came along, the initial use cases were not the ones that have created all the, deca-billion-dollar companies we have now. We don't really know.
Yeah.
And so would it be fair to say the message there is just be open to whatever it is and don't sort of ignore it?
Yes, and you get minutes now that are drafted by AI and all that sort of thing, and always not as good as they should be, but pretty impressive a lot of the time. And I think you just have to be open. I'm not particularly an open person. I'm if I'm honest, I'm tend to be more of a follower in that respect.
Yeah.
But even I can see it's coming, and it's going to come in a particular way. So I think that's where surrounding yourself with good people that know how to embrace that, probably in a way that you maybe can't, is another way of looking at it. But as a company, and that's where it's going to be interesting, because I'm in my 60s now, and there's lots of people of my generation running companies, and the world is catching up and going to move forward. And can they go with it?
Can I try draw, and tell me if you think this is off here, try draw a through line between what you were saying before about digital communication and AI. So personal thesis I have is that public markets, and to be very blunt about it, and I'm Australian, we're blunt people, a lot of the older generation that runs a lot of the public market, I think have been too slow to adapt to this new world of digital communication. And I'm not just saying that because it's my business. I'm saying that because I think it's true, right? And the reality is people don't open the newspaper to look at a share price. They don't really call up a broker to place a trade. And nothing that an individual running a public company does is going to change that. And world's been a little bit too slow to move to that, which is why I think that a lot of the investor class is now looking at assets outside of equities because they're just better at doing this. Is it a similar sort of thing potentially with AI, that in general the world's changing very quickly and the whole digitization and how that's going to change the investor side, it's just going to be an imperative to catch up?
Yes is the answer. The thing is, things are changing so fast. It's boards need good advice as well as actually people who are prepared to embrace those changes. And are we good at doing that in our company? Probably not really. I think we've got some good advisors and so on, but it's actually going out there. And I think the frustrations I mentioned before about social media and what is going on there, and how that then interlinks with AI. I talked to a company yesterday about AI and how the tools can help you understand who's actually watching you and who's looking at you and so on and so forth. So I think the tools are out there. It's a question of whether companies are actually embracing them and taking that challenge. And I think companies need to be more proactive about going out and looking for those opportunities, because the world is changing, and the old-fashioned board of once-a-month board meetings and that is going to be different in the future compared to where it is now. Certainly the communication with shareholders and with stakeholders, trying to find a new audience to hear your story that doesn't know you even exist is going to be the ultimate challenge. I had a call on exactly that yesterday. And I'm on the board of I'm a non-exec of another company discussing exactly that.
Yeah, right, interesting. So look, changing tack slightly, you have primarily worked in broad category of exploration companies.
Yep.
And I'm going to broaden that out. Exploration companies in my mind are not just in the resource sector looking for gold or copper or lithium or whatever. They're also tech companies that are exploring for product market fit. They're biotech companies that are trying to get on the market, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
Early stage companies in general are trying to find something new. Now that is a very long-term process. Every overnight success story is sort of 10 years in the making. The public markets are not always very good at taking a long-term view. They can be very short-term. The market demands news flow, they demand communication, they demand results. It has to fit into a tidy interim and final year format, but that doesn't really work. And one of my observations has been, and it'd be good to hear your thoughts on this, that is one of the key challenges in early stage public companies. How do you balance the long-term requirements of the business with the very short-term requirements or demands of the market. And so my question to you is, one, does that resonate? And then I want to get into how you've dealt with that over the last couple of decades.
Yes, it resonates very much. If you're from start, idea, concept, etc., to being on production, value point, etc., sale, whatever it is, you're right. It could be 5-10 years. And actually, I think I'm trying to be careful wording here. A lot of the investor base doesn't understand that. It really hasn't a concept. They're really looking at a 2-year return or 3 or whatever it is, and they want results like now and next week and so on. And they don't understand that, and it's not because companies are slow at doing it. Companies would want to go as fast as they can, but they've got to discover it, they've got to test it, they've got to appraise it, they've then got to get money to develop it, and it all takes time. And then there's things that are outside your control, governments, permitting, approvals, and in the farming industry, it's all the regulatory and the medicinal improvements. So there's a process that you're in control of, and a process you're not in control of. But what you can control is how you message. And what kind of works for shareholders who are looking more short term is bite-sized pieces, catalysts for value points. Yeah. And so you're really kind of breaking up your 5-year period into periods where you say, if we do that, that's a catalyst for a major movement in your stock, or that whether it's a government approval or permit or whatever. And the company I'm involved in now, we're looking at 2 or 3 of them in the next few months. That's, the market's expecting that. And we're trying to build for that thing where you hit that catalyst and then you get to the next catalyst and so on. So bite-sized pieces, because lots of shareholders can't play the long game, but they can play the short game and the bite-sized pieces.
And so, question. One of the worst pieces of advice I have heard a public company receive that sort of relates to this is from the advisor industry, where when there is bad news, and there's always bad news in public companies, where there's bad news or something's delayed, which invariably happens in these situations, the advice they get is, you mustn't say anything. So there's bad news, we've got to turn the strategy around, we've got to wait for this to come through. What we must do is be quiet, because nothing good can come of it, and we'll start talking to the market again when things pick up. I think that's particularly bad advice. What do you think?
I think if you've got bad news in a public company, you're almost certainly obligated to get it out, because it's director responsibility, legal, etc., fiduciary duties. But there's also things do go wrong and they come at you from left field you don't see, and it's how do you manage your way through that and explain your way as to how you're going to move forward from that. And I could give you numerous examples of where we've not got it particularly right. It really is a struggle to try and work out how do you get bad news out in a way that comes across as not as bad as it sounds or more positive. And again, maybe it's down to your bite-sized pieces again. As you come back, you put the news out. A lot of investors respect honesty and transparency, and so you have to be as transparent as you can be without killing your stock price. But it is a real struggle. You sit as a board wondering how on earth do we explain this one. And also from an AIM company point of view, you've got a nomad saying you need to tell somebody. So so you're continually in that sort of dilemma from you want to get great news out all the time, but then you recognise this stuff you have to put out that's not going to be welcomed by the market.
And because it's also the case, right, that let's take exploration company, because that's the space where we're in. Assay results are delayed. Happens. If you just put out an announcement that says the results are delayed, then with no education or context, your top shareholder who you can get on the phone to, you might be able to say, well, look, in Nevada at the moment, the labs are full and everyone's delayed. And they're like, all right, fair enough, I get it. But to an individual investor, they might be like, I've got no idea. Maybe the company's pilfering money, maybe they're just taking a holiday, and then they go try figure it out amongst themselves, and with no answer, they just assume the worst outcome. And that's where I think, just even to your point, being honest and taking the time to explain it can dispel a lot of those rabbit hole type conversations.
Yeah, well, what we've found has been quite powerful is certainly in the last couple of years is actually having Q&A sessions with your chief exec, your chairman, with a facilitator who asks the difficult questions. And then you've got trying to put something in black and white in an RNS or a press release will be read differently by 10 different people.
Yeah. And they're sanitized.
And then some will get it, some won't get it, and then the next thing you know, social media has gone crazy. Having those audiences in a relatively quickly time after those press releases go out, where the CEO can say, this is what's really going on, this is why this didn't happen, or this is why we've had to delay it. And then you get the questions, and you can obviously, there's certain things you can say and can't say, but you can at least have a communication, and then the shareholders or the investors at least feel they've had the chance to hear. And I think verbal communication is always 100 times better than non-verbal, because even on social media, it's extremely difficult to get your message across.
I think that's a fantastic point and advice.
Yeah.
All right, changing tack slightly again. So you've been on a lot of boards.
Yeah.
I would like to understand what you think is the most underrated board skill.
Well, there's kind of two. One is challenge, the ability to challenge in an objective manner, and that can mean that you are challenging the rest of the board, not necessarily to win, but at least to get your point. And the other one is to listen. And it's something I'm not particularly brilliant at, but it's something some of the directors I've been on boards with, some of the best ones are the ones who wait, and then they come out with a little hand grenade of why has nobody thought of this? And so there's that. The board needs a lot of different skills, but you as a director, you must have the ability to challenge. You shouldn't be frightened about taking on your chairman. I'm saying taking on in the right way. In the sense
constructively,
yeah, and I've done that before, and I've actually been removed from a board or resigned from a board from a public company because I disagreed with the way the company was going and things it was doing. And so that's a personal decision you make at some time. But I think the listening thing, a board I'm on at the moment, there's one individual he listens and then he comes out with bombshells, and it's brilliant.
It's sort of interesting though, because in meetings and in board meetings, I always find the most impressive people, and I think you can judge the caliber of a person by how many questions they ask and the sort of insertions into the conversation they make. Because quite often it's the least secure, least knowledgeable people that are constantly trying to throw out opinions and ideas. But it's really impressive when someone is willing to ask a question that shows that they don't know something and not be scared of looking stupid and be very curious. And then when they make a point, like the example you made, they're like, wow, that's a killer point. That is very relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could give you lots of examples of things that board members have asked, which just make you fall over laughing, because it's whether it's idiosyncrasies of the English language or whatever, and so on. But I think having it at a board level, having the ability, and there's another thing. If you're a small company, moving, shaking, trying to move a project forward, in a lot of cases, limited capital, you're moving and shaking. You need board directors who kind of played that before, because if you've come from a big four or a major entity where money's never been a problem, and you're in a small company where you want to do something, you haven't got the capital to do it, the market's not right, you have to maneuver, you have to do things in a different way. And actually there's a certain bias in a lot of the boards on the London Stock Exchange of individuals who are on boards who probably should be on boards, because they're on there because of their reputation, brand, who they used to work for, but not necessarily the right company who they used to work for. I've got to be careful what I say there, but I've seen board structures before where you think, why are those two individuals on the board on this kind of company? And it's a balance again of the skill set, but having the right directors with knowing how to work in those challenging environments can be quite interesting.
And so like they have a reason for existence on the board beyond just filling a seat. Yeah.
Well, every board director should add value. You should be bringing something different to the table, whether it's technical, operational, financial experience, just that wide knowledge of industry. But you shouldn't be just sitting on the board there getting your monthly paycheck and then going away. You should be adding value, and that's not just at the board meetings. It's in meetings like I had yesterday, where I introduced somebody to somebody, and that's part of the role of a non-exec, is actually bringing something different to the board, and it's asking them really, why are we doing this? Wouldn't it be better if we thought about this? And that's what the role of a non-exec is. It's just to challenge and to ask those awkward questions. It's not great when you're in management suddenly thinking, why didn't we think of this? But that's exactly why you have non-execs.
Yeah. Well, look, some fantastic insights and stories, and we could talk about this for hours, but in the interest of bite size, we'll leave it there. And I'm going to put you on the spot here. You are a great connector and have always been very generous to our public leaders community. So we can cut this out if you disagree. But if anyone is listening or watching this and they would like to connect with you, your details are readily available online and on LinkedIn. Are you happy if they reach out and ask you some questions?
No, I've interestingly had contact only a few months ago from a university student in Leeds who's Chilean. Yeah. I'm working for a company that's based in Chile, and he asked me to help mentor him, as part of his university process. So these approaches come from all over, and why wouldn't you? Because I've learnt various things over life, good and bad, over many years in business, and I think helping others to navigate through those challenges is part of what you want to be doing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Gordon. It's great to speak with you.
Okay. Good. Cheers. Thank you.